Before we begin, make sure you stay with this story until the very last moment, because what happened in that crowded restaurant didn't just silence a billionaire, it changed two lives forever. And if stories about courage, dignity, and unexpected redemption move you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know which story might be the one that stays with you. It was raining the night everything changed. Daniel Harper hadn't planned on being there. The upscale restaurant in downtown Manhattan was far beyond his usual budget, a place where crystal glasses shimmered beneath chandeliers and conversations floated in low, confident tones. But it was his daughter Lily's 8th birthday, and for weeks she had been talking about the fancy place with the golden lights she'd seen through the taxi window on their way home from her school recital. Daniel had promised her that one day, when things got better, he would take her somewhere special. Things hadn't gotten better, not really. Since his wife's passing 3 years earlier, Daniel had been juggling 2 jobs, construction during the day and driving for a rideshare company at night. Bills piled up, grief lingered, sleep was a luxury, but Lily was his light. Her laughter filled the tiny apartment they shared in Queens, turning it into something warmer than any mansion. So that night, he wore his only suit, a little worn at the elbows but freshly pressed. Lily wore a pale blue dress that had once belonged to her mother. She twirled in front of the restaurant in trance, her eyes glowing brighter than the city lights. Inside, the maitre d' hesitated when he saw them. Daniel noticed the flicker of doubt, the quick glance at his scuffed shoes, the subtle tightening of lips. But he held his head high. He had made a reservation. He had saved for months. They were shown to a table near the center of the room. That was when she walked in. Victoria Sterling. Everyone knew the name. CEO of Sterling Global Enterprises. Tech visionary. Real estate mogul. Net worth rumored in the billions. She appeared regularly on the covers of magazines like Forbes and Vogue. She moved like someone accustomed to power, sharp heels clicking against marble floors, a tailored white blazer draped over her shoulders like a crown. The entire room shifted when she entered. She was seated just 2 tables away from Daniel and Lily. At first, Daniel didn't pay attention. He was too busy watching Lily struggle politely with her napkin, her small fingers determined to behave like a princess. He smiled at her, his heart swelling. Then the incident happened. Lily accidentally knocked over her glass of sparkling water. It spilled across the table, dripping onto the polished floor. It was a small thing. A simple accident, but the splash reached the edge of Victoria Sterling's designer heels. Victoria froze. The conversation around her stopped. She slowly turned her head toward Lily, her expression hardening. "Unbelievable," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the restaurant like glass. "Can't they seat appropriate guests in a different section?" The words weren't screamed. They didn't need to be. They carried the kind of quiet cruelty that makes a room colder. Daniel felt Lily's hand grip his under the table. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." Victoria stood, examining the faint water spots on her shoes as if they were acid burns. "This is what happens when standards slip," she continued, clearly aware that everyone was listening. "People who don't belong try to pretend they do." Daniel's face flushed. His first instinct was to shrink, to apologize profusely, to gather Lily and leave before her tears fell. But then he looked at his daughter. Her eyes were filling, not just with embarrassment, but with something worse. Shame, and something inside him snapped. He rose slowly from his chair. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but firm, "it was an accident." "She's 8 years old." Victoria arched an eyebrow. "And you think that excuses it?" "I think," Daniel replied, "that dignity isn't reserved for people with expensive shoes." The room went silent. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't used to being challenged. Not publicly. Not by someone in a worn suit. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Daniel said, "a human being. Just like my daughter." The words hung in the air. For a moment, it looked like security might intervene. A manager rushed over, whispering nervously, offering to comp Victoria's meal, to move Daniel and Lily to a different section, to handle the situation. But Daniel shook his head. "We're not moving," he said. "We paid for our meal. My daughter deserves to celebrate her birthday without feeling less than anyone else in this room." Lily looked up at him, stunned. Proud. Victoria stared at Daniel, something flickering behind her sharp gaze. Anger, shock, and then, unexpectedly, hesitation. She dismissed the manager with a wave. "Leave us," she said. The restaurant buzzed with tension. Victoria stepped closer to Daniel's table. Her voice lowered, no longer performative. "You're very bold," she said. "No," Daniel answered. "I'm just a father." There was something in that word, father, that seemed to hit her differently. Her posture shifted ever so slightly. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel Harper. And you think standing up to me makes you noble?" "No," he replied. "I think teaching my daughter that her worth isn't defined by someone else's bank account does." Victoria's gaze moved to Lily. Lily quickly wiped her cheeks and straightened in her chair. "I'm sorry about your shoes," Lily said softly. "They're very pretty." Victoria stared at her for a long moment. Then something no one expected happened. Victoria Sterling pulled out a chair and sat down at their table. Gasps echoed around the room. "When was the last time you celebrated your birthday somewhere special?" Victoria asked Lily. Lily blinked. "Never." Daniel stiffened, unsure where this was going. Victoria looked around the lavish dining room, the crystal, the polished silver, the perfectly arranged centerpieces. "When I was 8, she said slowly, "my father was working 3 jobs. We couldn't afford places like this either." Daniel was caught off guard. Victoria continued, her voice losing its sharp edge. "I swore I'd never feel small again. I built an empire so no one could ever look down on me." Her eyes met Daniel's, but somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be on the other side. Silence wrapped around them. She turned to Lily. "You shouldn't feel ashamed for being here." Then, to everyone's astonishment, Victoria removed her heels. She set them aside and laughed lightly. "They're just shoes." The tension dissolved like mist in sunlight. She asked the waiter to bring the biggest dessert they had. Not just for Lily, for the entire restaurant. And then she did something even more shocking. She asked Daniel about his life. He told her about losing his wife. About construction work. About driving strangers through the night. About Lily's dream of becoming an architect because she wanted to build houses where everyone feels welcome. Victoria listened, really listened. By the end of the night, she handed Daniel her card. "Come see me Monday," she said. "Not for charity, for opportunity." Daniel hesitated. "I don't want a handout. I don't give handouts," she replied. "I invest." Months later, Daniel found himself working in community development under Sterling Global's new Urban Renewal Division, a program Victoria launched after that night, focused on affordable housing and family-centered design. But the real change wasn't in business. It was in her. Victoria began visiting the neighborhoods her company developed. She met families. She funded scholarships. She created mentorship programs for single parents trying to rebuild their lives. And every year, on Lily's birthday, a small box arrived at their apartment. Inside was a handwritten note. "Never let anyone make you feel small." Years later, when Lily stood on a stage accepting an award for innovative community architecture, she spotted 2 familiar faces in the audience. Her father, and Victoria Sterling, because sometimes, courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply stands up in a quiet restaurant and says, "My daughter belongs here." And sometimes, the person who needs that reminder the most is the one sitting in designer heels. If this story touched your heart, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because the world changes not just through wealth or power, but through ordinary people who choose dignity over silence. And you never know when standing up once might change everything forever.